call this meeting up, get the official name, the Nevada Legislature Board of Directors for the Corporation for Public Benefit to administer to the Nevada Youth Legislature. Hereafter, we will refer to this as the NYL. And so I'm calling this meeting to order. And Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Senator Harris? Senator Scheibel? Assemblywoman Mosca?
Here.
Assemblywoman Torres? Former Senator Woodhouse?
Here.
Mr. Akuta-Lim?
Here.
Chair Wiener?
Present. Thank you, Secretary. Under agenda item number 2, we will open the meeting up to public comment, whether it be questions or comments from the public who might want to share thoughts with us. Do we have anyone in the north wanting to come forward? Does anyone in the south want to appear before the board? Anyone on the telephone? Thank you very much. We will move on then to agenda item number 3, approval of the minutes for the meeting of September 21, 2023. Have all the members had an opportunity to review the minutes?
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
on Joyce Woodhouse, for the record, I move approval of the minutes.
We have a motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
I will second that motion.
We have a second from Assembly Member Mosca. Do we have any discussion before the vote? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Please note unanimous support among members present. Moving on to agenda item number 4. This is our opportunity to review the NYL budget for FY, or fiscal year 2024-2025, and we are privileged and pleased to have Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel, Legal Division, to present the budget to us. Mr. Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. So before you, you have a spreadsheet that shows multiple previous years in addition to multiple future years. As you know, part of the reason for this is that the travel needs for the Youth Legislature are substantially different in the 2 years of the biennium. There's 1 year that is much more travel heavy with the youth legislators from the South coming up north than the other year where the legislators from the north go down to the south. Fiscal year 21-22, which is the first year on the budget sheet, is one of those years where travel was light. It's not exactly analogous. That was coming out of COVID where there wasn't much travel happening at all, but that would be the comparable year for the light years going forward. And then fiscal 22-23 is the preceding year that would have had the heavier travel. So those are included in this spreadsheet for comparison's sake. Fiscal year 23-24, which we're currently in and which the board approved the budget for at its previous meeting, is another one of those light travel years. So you can also use it for comparison's sake to the 3 fiscal years on the other sheet of the spreadsheet. Fiscal 24-25 is the year of this biennium in which travel would be heavy. You can see that as a result of the travel needs of the youth legislature during this year, the reserves that the board has built up would be substantially depleted. The legislature provided a $10,000 appropriation to the youth legislature for this biennium, split up with $5,000 in each of the 2 fiscal years. That is not sufficient to cover the general expenses of the youth legislature during the travel-heavy year, which is why you can see the reserves for the youth legislature would fall from about $17,500 at the conclusion of the current fiscal year to about $4,500 at the conclusion of the next fiscal year. While fiscal 24-25 is the budget year that's agendized to be considered, I included kind of a projection of what would be necessary for 25-26 and 26-27 for comparison's sake. the legislature provided about $10,000 of appropriation authority during the current biennium. For 25-26 and 26-27, I projected the legislature providing about $30,000 of appropriation authority. And that's a level that would be generally consistent with the level of spending that would be expected of roughly $30,000 over that biennium, for the youth legislature to have a stable financial position. In my conversations with the director, there is a possibility that more money could be made available to the youth legislature during the second year of the current biennium, so fiscal 24-25, to make sure that the youth legislature doesn't wind up in a deficit position. So with that, these numbers are before you for consideration, and one of the things the board may wish to consider is making that request of the director to make more financial resources available to the youth legislature during the second year of this biennium, and then to include an increased level of support for the youth legislature in future biennia going forward. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
I do have a few, and I hope the board takes a little bit of time to analyze this, but I have a lot of scribbles, so bear with me as I work through them. But I noticed, for example, I did comparisons to 2022 to 23, and then 24 to 25, which would be a parallel year in the two-year cycle. And I'm seeing that, I'm trying to get here. I found, for example, in in-state travel, in the 2 years, it's close to $2,000 less proposed in 2024 and 25 than it was in the two-year cycle prior, the comparable year that we're looking at earlier. Trying to get another one where it looks substantially less. Anyway, total, I was seeing a substantial, a noticeable smaller figure for 2024-25 than in 2022-23. And I'm wondering, again, where we have inflation that is a factor in other costs, if we're projecting with that in mind on some of these costs and evaluations. Also, where we have scholarships, currently, and in projecting a larger amount going forward, we're going to discuss that today, but currently, based on how we've configured, we would have $3,500 total in scholarships, and that number is inconsistent throughout as well. And so I'm just wondering, Mr. Killian, as you had suggested, that we have an opportunity to work with you and with people, the experts in finance. One of our questions might be, when should we, you've been very gracious to help us satisfy the costs of the program through the remainder of this two-year cohort term. So when would be the appropriate time for us as a board to start working, having that conversation with the financial experts and you to ensure going forward that you know, we do have this conversation around what expectations might be and what might show up based on our actual experience and not just the numbers. So what would you suggest?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. So kind of taking those questions in turn, we built in a little bit of an inflation factor from year to year based on the comparable year's expenses. So for fiscal 22-23, the actual amount spent for in-state travel was $11,828, and what's proposed for fiscal 24-25 is $12,500. Similarly, the amount spent in the supplies and operating category, which is generally supplies for the youth legislature, but also hotel expenses. For 22-23, the actual amount was just under $4,600. That amount was inflated to about $5,000 for 24-25. And then similarly, projecting forward to 26-27, which would be the next similar heavy travel year, we increased in-state travel from $12,500 to $13,500, and then supplies from $5,000 to $5,500. Just applying about a 10% inflation factor, not actually knowing what inflation will look like between those years, and trying to build in a bit of a cushion given that we've seen particularly airfare expenses for Southwest between Reno and Las Vegas growing at a rate that substantially outpaces inflation. And then on the scholarships category, I alluded to this during the previous meeting, but we were in an awkward situation for accounting purposes, during the current fiscal year, since the Youth Legislature Board met in September instead of in June, as it typically would, the expenses that were approved for a scholarship had to be charged against the following fiscal year, since the state fiscal year closes on June 30th, rather than the preceding fiscal year as would ordinarily be done. So that's why you see no expenses paid out for scholarships for fiscal 22-23 and then $4,500 for 23-24. That was accounting for both the $1,750 in previously approved scholarships that had been then paid out, in addition to the $2,750 in scholarships that were approved at the previous board meeting. Moving forward, we had projected scholarships at that $2,750 level, which parallels the expected gifts, grants, and donations contribution of $2,750 in each of those years. Certainly, if the intent is to offer scholarships at a $3,500 level, we can make that adjustment and adjust the gifts, grants, and donations figure to match. And then in terms of timing of conversations going forward, I think ideally, historically, the board has worked on a year-to-year budget cycle, which, given that the legislature generally works on a biennial budget cycle, has not exactly been in sync, which has resulted in some expenses, and especially when the youth legislature program shifted which year was the heavy year for travel, it led to the LCB making a request to the legislature for funding that didn't necessarily match what the youth legislature was anticipating doing in the upcoming biennium. So my suggestion would be that it might be helpful for the board to also move to more of a biennial budget cycle as opposed to an annual budget cycle, and to aim to have those figures finalized by its annual meeting in the summer of each even-numbered year, so that there's time for those conversations to happen and those numbers to be finalized before the LCB completes its budget request for the upcoming legislature in the winter and spring of the odd-numbered year. I hope that's helpful, Madam Chair. I can elaborate on that further.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gray. If I may ask, thank you for that. I always remembered a biennial, so I must be on another planet. So thank you for that clarification. More specifically, if you'd be so kind, if you'd give us, I had suggested in my comments that we meet before, come up with something before interim finance meets, and we have a date for that. When would you suggest that we start those conversations? Because what you're saying is an end game for having information is fast approaching. When should we start the conversation? What would you recommend?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. So I think now the board has kind of settled into this cadence of having semi-annual meetings, where there's typically a meeting around January of the even-numbered year, followed by the annual meeting in the summer of each year. And I think this is probably the best timing to ensure that the budgets presented to the legislature match the needs of the youth legislature, to start having that conversation around the timing of this meeting in the winter of the even-numbered year, and then finalizing a budget for the biennium for presentation to and approval by the board by the summer meeting during each even-numbered year of each following biennium.
Now is a great time to start. Okay. I get that. No, you're very diplomatic, and I appreciate your cordiality in working with my questions. Do we have any additional questions? Yes, Assemblyman Mosca. Assembly Member Mosca.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and good to see you, Mr. Killian. And I just had a question regarding how the reserves are going to lower. Is there historical data about where the reserves have been before? Have we seen this dip before? Is this a lower dip at this proposed budget than it would be in the past? Or has the youth legislature always kind of had a larger reserve?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the Assemblywoman, and it's good to see you again as well, Assemblywoman. There was a little bit of a bubble of reserves that built up as a result of COVID, between legislative appropriations that were higher, anticipating travel that didn't happen, and then the travel that ultimately did not happen during the years that were affected by COVID. The youth legislature built up a significant reserve in its account. And I believe part of what the legislature was considering in the appropriations that it approved for the youth legislature was spending down some of that reserve. I don't know that the intent was necessarily to spend down the reserve as far as it's being spent down in this current biennium, which is why the director is willing to have the conversations about making some additional money available to get the youth legislature through the current biennium. But the original reserve level that had gotten up, I think, as high as 30,000 or so a couple of years ago was significantly higher than the organization has had in the past. The result of the proposed 24-25 budget of dipping down to under 5,000 is significantly lower than the organization would have had in the past. Somewhere in between those figures has been more typical in previous years.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful.
Any additional questions? Comments? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Killian. We'll be in touch. Should we work through you then to schedule a meeting ASAP with the board and the appropriate people at the legislative staff? Should we work through you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Council. Yes, I'm happy to coordinate those meetings between yourself or whatever other members of the board you would prefer and the director's office.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Okay. Any additional? We don't. I always ask this of our counsel, Mr. Killian. Do we need a vote? Then I believe I would entertain a vote to approve the budgetary materials that Mr. Killian has provided to us. A motion, please.
Madam Chair, if I could suggest, if the intent
Yes.
is to have further conversations before finalizing this potentially at the annual meeting, then a vote wouldn't be necessary at this time.
Okay. That's why I hesitated. Okay, thank you very much. Then we'll move on. Thank you, Mr. Killian. I was uncertain. Thank you. Then we'll move on to agenda item number 5, scholarships. Based on what the board discussed at our September meeting and the idea of consolidating, we have done that at the request of board members. We've been working on that. And so going forward with this year's scholarships, up-leveling the amounts to draw more interest, we have maintained the Senator Valerie Weiner Retired NYL Scholarship for $1,000, and we have consolidated other scholarship investments that we had and new money to create a scholarship, the NYL or Nevada Youth Legislature Scholarship for $2,500. And those participating as donors, I'm contributing $250, Senator Woodhouse $750, Assemblymember Mosca $500, former youth legislator John Oglesby and his wife $500, and Tina Ashdown $500. So thank you all for your generosity. This creates a much more substantial inducement for people to show an interest in the scholarships that we offer. So thank you very much. Any questions or comments? A generous board and program facilitator. Thank you, Tina. We'll move on to agenda item number 6. The summary report of our meetings, trainings, and other activities through this current term up to this point. We had, since our last meeting, I'm bringing it since January, we had on January 12th, they had an assignment deadline, which is relatively new in the history of the program. And this is 3 questions and answers, and these are the youth legislators provided their own questions and then answered them. And this is a skill that we teach them how to work with. Answer the questions and ask them the way they might be asked and then answer them. And the participation level was very high among the youth legislators. October 12th, a required training was effective listening skills, along with November 14th, required training, power presentations. What I'd like to comment, mentioning both of these, that I substantially up-leveled and refined these training programs for this year, made them much more substantial, much more engaging. And Tina and I decided, as we do at many of our trainings, we chat as to how we'll go forward. We need more time, so we're going to add more time than we have historically invested in order to be able to cover the material and not crowd it at the end. The interest generated by youth legislators for these 2 programs is very high, and as has historically shown up for us, and it does at the end of this year when we do the evaluations with them. Listening typically is probably the most powerful training because most people are not trained in how to do it. Don't pay as much attention until it's brought to their attention. So this was an up-leveled year for training, and we will continue to do that moving forward. The optional activity today, the gathering and training on social communication or social conversation skill, was successful. Boy, in the moment, we had 13 current youth legislators from the South, and I believe we have 16 participate from the South. Is that right, Tina?
Yes.
Yes. And I can say confidently we've never had that large a participation, especially for an optional event. It was highly successful, and confident that we all learned something from the experience. The same parallel gathering in Carson City was canceled for yesterday because of scheduling conflict. Any questions or comments about anything that I've just shared? Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 7. Well, Madam Secretary, please note that Senators Scheibel and Harris have joined us for the board meeting. Number 7, status of the Nevada Civic Seal and possible school credits. This again was something that the board was interested in pursuing. Tina and I have had several conversations. We did talk to Ms. Malorny and had a wonderful Zoom with her, and I've asked Tina to do subsequent follow-up, so please, Tina, and I will offer some additional comments after Tina stops choking. Anyway, we did provide you with a handout that we've developed that we're going to talk with you about as she completes this. We're going to talk about another option. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tina Ashdown, Program Facilitator for the Nevada Youth Legislature. Senator Weiner and I did meet virtually with Janie Malorny, the Nevada Department of Education Office and Teaching and Learning, to talk about the Nevada Civic Seal and school credit for volunteer hours. She gave us information about these programs and contact information for school district personnel. I'm sorry. Sorry. Who might be able to give us more information. The Nevada Civic Seal is a program that is initiated by the student. Everything they need to pursue this avenue is found online. The volunteer hours needed for this honor is supervised by a school employee. The Clark County School District may not have the personnel available for this program. My Clark County contact did not know of any schools that are offering the Civic Seal. I did not get an answer about it from the Washoe County School District. Well, for goodness sakes. Students in Nevada can earn up to 1 credit hour for time spent volunteering with an approved community agency. They get 1/2 credit for every 60 volunteer hours. The contacts from Clark and Washoe County School Districts said that the youth legislators should be eligible to receive credit through a program of community service. We can let the students know to contact their school counselors directly and that say they're interested in using NYL for community service credit. The schools can handle all the paperwork from there. You have before you a document that lists some of the service hours spent by Nevada youth legislators. A couple of BD ideas were also discussed during the meeting. The first idea was a BDR to make the school districts accept the NYL service as volunteer hours, but she didn't think that that would be necessary. The second idea is for a BDR that would give internship credits for participation in the Nevada Youth Legislature. As I said before, you have a document that lists most of the volunteer hours for service in the Nevada Youth Legislature. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions the members of the board might have.
Assemblymember Mosca.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this really important information and following up on it. If we were to go the internship route, would the school district still have to do all the logistics, or would NYL be able to handle that internally for the credit?
I'll take it, Tina, and you can maybe catch your breath. We've had these conversations. The one thing that is a little, and we can provide the information because we keep basically a spreadsheet for every youth legislator, and they know every time they get together what their status is, what they've missed. They know exactly what their standing is. The one of the concerns, and this would be conversation, if indeed there were an internship program created, it can be confusing because it would be in the school district as an internship program, but it isn't the Nevada Youth Legislature internship program. This is not an internship program in its identity and its status. So one of the things that we talked about would fit very well into volunteer hours. The thing that Tina had explained is that it's 120 hours for a full credit. We don't know if that spans how many years in high school. We don't know what that looks like time-wise. Another thing is that if you look at this sheet, we worked on every possible level of opportunity of engagement in the program, and we come up with 104 hours. A couple of these are optional, like today, the gathering, but they showed up, so they get credit for it. So would there be room to maybe have a conversation to negotiate where would another 16 hours show up? Or, as we talked today, possibly, because this could fall under community hours or volunteer hours, this could be 104 of their 120 to get a full credit. It could possibly be combined with, but they'd still be able to use it for community hours credit. That's something we'll have further conversation. But this is where we are right now with the follow-up. And 104 is a lot of hours over a 2-year period. Because we budgeted in there an hour to do this. And, we were very careful about how we allocated times for each activity. This is the first time we've done that, so it was a nice experience. And does that help resolve the question?
Yes, thank you.
So I'd like to pick up here, too, in looking at these activity credits, there's another, something that I talked to Tina about, and we have not thought about this before, opportunities for additional activity credits or half credits for those who provide additional service to or on behalf of the NYL. And we're growing more of those opportunities. One, however, we've had for a long time, and that's the student representing the NYL to work with the Nevada Association of Student Councils to recommend a student member on the State Board of Education. So that might be something we'd allocate an additional activity credit or whatever we would allocate to that. Others that are showing up recently, particularly in northern Nevada, and as we grow our facility here in the south, it would be my hope we could have conversations to bring something similar here. That's a lot of lead up to. The north has had a wonderful privilege, and it's grown relatively quickly, and more to come, I'm sure, of delegations that are working with the University of Nevada at the Reno campus. They might have a program or something. And there's a whole new energy around their wanting to visit the legislature, but it's not the legislature. They want to meet youth legislators. Am I correct, Tina? That's what she shared. They're not coming to tour the building, and by the way, there's youth legislators. They are aligned in their timeline to come and meet youth legislators.
International.
One of the delegations had 15 people from 14 countries. The last one was Papua New Guinea, right? That was the last delegation. And so what we learned, one, they're great. Our youth legislators are amazing about saying yes to this. So we might have 3 or 4 of them as hosts. I call them social hosts. What I realized was the importance of doing social host training, because certain types of questions show up with the international delegates that they aren't prepared for. And we prepared them, and so they grew substantially between the large international delegation having the training for their their level of preparation for the Papua New Guinea delegation. And so, for example, then, the social host training, if we don't include that, which you may blend into curricula going forward, again, learning as we go, that hour or 2 hours should be additional credit hours. Doing the activity itself, coming to the legislature to host, could be optional credit time. And so another optional is that we've started a new tradition where we have youth legislators. It's in the north. Our committee that delivers the annual report to the governor and meets with the governor. We did that for the first time officially this last time. It was extraordinary. I think we had one or two alums, and I mean, it was a wonderful experience to sit with the governor. So that would be another optional credit opportunity. So that's something that I want to talk about, if that's something that looks. Now, the key would be that it's something that benefits, that's directly connected with the youth legislature. You know, in some ways, part of what they do represents, you know, whether it's a delegation or it's representing, you know, with the annual report. It needs to be something relevant to the program, not something that they're a youth legislator and they're going out to the community doing something. It has to be connected. That would be my thought. But other things will be showing up. So what are your feelings about are adding these as additional activity credits? And my thought would be likely the people doing it don't need them, but these could also fill in for deficiencies for those who might miss a training or miss an assignment, that this could make up for that. It could be a fill-in. Senator Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm all for students being able to get as much deserved credit for what they're doing involved in this program as possible, right? I mean, the idea that they do the amount of work that they do and get very little educational acknowledgement in return is a travesty. So I'm glad to see it being addressed. As many credits as we can get these kids for the hard work that they put in and the very clear, I think at this point, demonstrated knowledge and skills that they develop while they're participants of the program, the better.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for supporting that. Anyone else? Sanu Kudalim?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I echo what Senator Harris mentioned. I think given not just the amount of work that youth legislators put in for these formal activities, but other activities that have come about over the years, I think having an acknowledgement in the form of activity credit for purposes of attendance or something similar would be really important. I also think it'll be important to think about which youth legislators, depending on geographic region, have access to different opportunities. Of course, given state capital in Carson City, legislative building in Carson City, it's wonderful for youth legislators who either live up north or happen to be in the area during one of these events to be able to participate. For youth legislators in other parts of our state, it'll be really, I think, important to kind of consider whether other events, activities that those youth legislators might be able to partake in, supplemental or in addition to these formal activities, just given different regions of our state and where different events and programs are being held. But all in all, I do think it's important to have that acknowledgement and show the youth legislators that, you know, not only are they getting personal growth and benefit from these other activities, but there is an acknowledgement of the work that they put in when they participate or get involved in some of these other programs.
Thank you. Did you have some, Senator Woodhouse?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The comments made by yourself, Madam Chair, Senator Harris, and Mr. Zanakuda Lim, I totally agree with, but it's not a but. I think one of the things that we all realize that the more different opportunities that students can have an opportunity to become involved in, you never know what is the catalyst that this is what I want to do, or is just furthering the growth of that student. And having so many different options gives them a better chance of knowing exactly where they want to go, what they can do. Because I think sometimes we get, we have this group of activities for students, and we all know what it's going to do for them, but whatever we can add to it might be the spark for something else. And you don't know until all those things are out there for them to take a look at and experience.
Thank you. And based on what Mr. Kudalim said, with the permission of the board, something I've been entertaining, and the timing isn't there, however, it will happen quickly, as we develop an affiliation through, new affiliations through our new location. This might be an opportunity to be called to go looking for other things, that might present an opportunity to have a conversation with UNLV to determine if there might be something comparable, a program there that invites international delegations or delegations from somewhere. The way the North has it, maybe the South can develop a parallel or a similar type of a program for the South, so that our Southern youth legislators, and even if it's a rural, once we have this, we can make it available, if they have enough notice, to be able to participate in a Northern or Southern. So if it's all right with the board as we move forward, I will be open to those possibilities, and Tina and I will have those conversations as well. And what's interesting, Tina, you were there. Would you comment on the maturity that our youth legislators demonstrated in dealing, in participating in these conversations with these international delegates?
They participate at a level beyond their years. They are welcoming to the international delegates, even though they have to work through an interpreter. They just listen to the interpreter and speak back, and they have done it with such class and elegance. It's very impressive.
Any other thoughts, questions, or comments? Okay, then we will look at those opportunities. I often say, not always looking for them, but sometimes we're called to them. They show up for us, the international delegations, and the training for social hosting. I mentioned earlier that I did do a special training, and what showed up was that there were certain things we thought we had taught them, and this is where they showed up in the real world, because of questions they were asked by this larger delegation involving politics. And we teach them at the very, very beginning and several times that we are not a political entity. We teach policy making, representative government, serving as a voice of your youth constituents, all of the things that are the root system of this program. And yet when they're asked a question about young people in politics, they respond with the word politics. So we worked through that, and that highly elevated their participation in the next international delegation. Their voice was there. My thought would be, Tina and I have chatted somewhere going forward as we continue to learn and grow the program, to teach everyone. Well, you can engage this social hosting training. We think we know where, we right now have a training in message accountability, and that probably will be up-leveled with the social hosting training. So we continue to grow and are thrilled with the opportunity. So Mr. Killian, we don't probably need a vote as to anything. If we have the permission of the board, it doesn't require a formal vote to be on the lookout for other ways to expand opportunities for our youth legislators.
Asher Killian, Legislative Council. Madam Chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Just want to be so sure about this. Okay. Then we'll move on to agenda item number 8. And Tina, I'm going to turn this over to you, and this is updating the website.
We sent an email out to former youth legislators and asked for endorsements for our website, and you have a document in your packet labeled agenda item number 8. Nevada Youth Legislature website, alumni endorsements. We have 8 of them from former youth legislators that give a glowing endorsement for what participating in the Nevada Youth Legislature has done for them.
And if I may add to that, again, this was based on a request from our board at our September meeting. We would, at my request, Tina will be adding the years the term years, and if they held office, what office and when they held that. These are all youth legislators who are mentor trainers, who have agreed, they're above and beyond just alums, but mentor trainers, and that's who we reached out to. And others are going to be coming in soon. Notice a nod here. This will continue to grow, but we can start with 8 and we'll continue to grow it. We have a great place to start, and they all have something different to say, and it's lovely. We'll move on then. Any questions or comments? Yes, Assembly Member Mosca.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was so great. Thank you for following up on that request. The only thing it made me really think about when I was reading about it is, have we ever had a discussion about social media for the Nevada Youth Legislature and promoting some of this?
Volunteering?
We have not discussed social media. One thing that we are very cautious about is engaging outlets or avenues of communication that can, that we don't have, as I won't say, we don't have as much executive opportunity to ensure that the message is being managed the way it should be, as we do with our own website. That was probably pretty wordy. However, did it say what I intended to say?
what you meant.
Yeah, thank you. That's kind of been something we've processed about being able to have the highest caliber of management opportunities with messages that we transmit. Any additional questions or comments about the website? And we'll add the years, Tina, and, okay. Let's move on to agenda item number 9. This is a proposal of collaboration provision in the bylaws. As a refresher, you'll remember my concerns about our being approached over a period of years, and we've had a little bit of lapse, but they come in chunks sometimes. Early on, it started as sometimes other legislatures reach out to us. Sometimes they're national organizations we've never heard of, but we research them. They're valid. We just don't know about them. They want to partner. They want to tap into us. They want a lot of things. Or they want to take our model and go national. And there are a lot of different proposals that have been offered. With these international delegations, this is why this is so important. Or it could be another state delegation, but lately it's international. We have received an interest, that we have a history of this already, from other countries that want to partner with us, and they have long lists of things that they want to accomplish. That kind of set a red flag up for me as to establishing a foundation for making these connections, processing what could be a disadvantage at doing it, because bottom line, we are a program of the Nevada State Legislature, a governmental entity, and this program is the legislature program, and so anything that we decide as a board to do has a direct impact on this body of service that the Nevada Legislature represents. And so we have a high level of responsibility. And so that's why Mr. Killian was very kind at addressing this through a bylaw, and he provided information for that. And I don't know if we could have a conversation, Mr. Killian, if you would present it, and then we can see what the board feels about it and if it responds to our concerns.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. So the materials you have before you, one is just a copy of the bylaws as they currently exist, and then the second document is a proposed new article of the bylaws relating to collaboration. At its core, this is just a simple set of bones to build collaboration provisions on top of. The first section generally provides that individual members of the board or youth legislators or any other person cannot bind the board to an agreement with any external entity for any sort of collaboration agreement, and that any any such purported agreement is not binding on the board. The second section provides the basic standards that the board would use to determine whether to agree to a collaboration agreement with some external entity. And those three core standards are, first, that public money that the board received would not be spent for any purpose other than supporting the youth legislature. Second, that the agreement would strengthen the activities of the youth legislature and present greater opportunities for youth legislators and other pupils in the state. And then third, that the benefits would effectively outweigh the costs, that what the foundation and the youth legislature get from the agreement would be worth more than the monetary and time costs to the board, to staff, and to others to implement the agreement. And then finally, the third section preserves the right of members of the board, staff, youth legislators, et cetera, to have informal conversations with external entities and to provide public information to external entities. So working together, that effectively says that you can still have informal conversations, you can still share public information, you just can't bind the board to a collaboration agreement without the consent of the board. So, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions about these provisions, or if the board would like to have a conversation, I'm happy to sit back and answer any questions that may come up.
Thank you very much, Asher. Mr. Killian, I do have a question, some concern, knowing that we may be engaging with these entities for the first time and not knowing a lot about the history or what a relationship might look like with them, because again, we've had organizations reach out to us in this country, we've had states reach out to us, we've had countries reach out to us, and I'm concerned about, one, any precedent we might set with one of these agreements. Could this cause issues for us going forward if we set a precedent with one relationship? How might that affect those going forward? And I can't even give you an example, but something we specifically do that we might be bound to because we've already done it. Two, I'm concerned, being able to give you an example again, about any possible unintended consequences or impacts or liabilities that we might incur, obviously unintentionally, through establishing these relationships.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. I think some of those concerns you just raised may be topics for conversation by the board generally, but with respect to the first, there would generally be no obligation by the board to enter into agreements with any entity whatsoever. And the fact that the board had entered into an agreement with one entity would not create an obligation on the board to enter into an agreement with another entity. It may have, persuasive power for members of the board to enter into similar agreements with other similar entities, but nothing in these provisions that are proposed to be added to the bylaws or in the law generally would require the board to enter into any particular agreement with any external entity, regardless of any agreements it may have made with other entities previously. And then to the second concern, there is a possibility that there may be a provision in an agreement that the board enters into that obligates the board to engage in some sort of activity which may accrue liability for the board. That's a concern that's inherent to any agreement with any entity. And so I think the best way to mitigate the risk to the youth legislature for that kind of situation going forward would just be to be careful to have either myself or whoever is occupying this position in the future, providing the board with legal assistance, have the opportunity to review any of those agreements in advance and make sure that they are written in a way that minimizes any risk for the board being obligated to anything that it wasn't expecting in the future.
Okay, that answers, yes, Senator Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope I'm not opening a can of worms here, but I wanted to see if we could discuss the third point about the finding of the benefits significantly outweighing the costs. I would propose that we amend to require the board to find that there are just simply benefits to the legislature to engage in the agreement. to make a determination about whether those benefits outweigh the costs might be a bit more difficult, especially when we are thinking about what kind of benefits we might see from engaging with another country, right? And
subjective.
That's right. And in fact, we may not see a huge amount of immediate return from engaging with another country, but the board may find it beneficial for the program as a whole. And so to focus on making sure that the findings suggest that there has to be some substantial additional benefit over costs might limit us a bit more than I think we're intending to. And so I'd like the board to have a bit of a conversation about potentially limiting this to the board finding that there's some benefit to the program in engaging with the agreement as opposed to the language of significantly outweighing the costs.
Thank you. I was having concerns about the subjectivity of that as well. And I think based on that, and I think you mentioned country, country is one that is a little, we can think of ideal relationships and how grand, except that's a state government, in essence, contracting with another country with a lot of unknowns. And that may be great. What maybe one thing that would make me feel more comfortable would be, as Mr. Killian so graciously offered, that we can work with legal, that we would have some provision that before entering any agreement, that we have to work hand in hand, step by step with legal to ensure not that, oh, yay, it looks great, let's do it, and then find out later that legal is an integral part of the developments as our voice, our legal voice in establishing these relationships. What are the thoughts of the board? Yeah, yes, Scheibel, Senator Scheibel.
I would agree. I think it makes sense to put the process for consulting legal into the bylaws. And I also agree that maybe making the standard just that the contract have some benefit to us would be a smart adjustment to the proposed bylaws and not requires this kind of weighing mechanism.
So I'm going to use just curiosity. Some benefits real subjective too. So maybe we would talk something to qualify versus some, maybe a measurable benefit, and we can determine what that looks like, but something that makes that a worthwhile benefit. So I get we don't want to do this because we're going to load ourselves down. So ask legal to help refine this a little bit.
I mean, personally, I'm comfortable with something as vague as a benefit or some benefit. The purpose just being that at a board meeting like this, we would have to articulate what the benefit would be. You know, students will learn from this. Students will gain experience from this.
Yes.
An articulable benefit.
Yeah, my colleague here is saying an articulable benefit because I don't think it's possible or even necessary to describe the quantity or the value of the benefit. And I might be paranoid here, but I even had this like momentary thought that we might be getting into a little bit of a gray area if we're talking about working with other entities that maybe don't have the same purpose that we do. For example, nonprofit or for-profit organizations. We don't want to start turning this into like Nevada will economically benefit from these arrangements, even though we could certainly say that, like, sure, we benefit from bringing new people to the state to see it for the first time, but we don't want to get stuck in a conversation where we're asking ourselves, was the $100 we spent on lunch worth the $250 these tourists spent at the gift shop? I think that's something we want to avoid.
Thank you all. And again, benefit, that enriches the program.
Yeah, sure.
Anyone else? Any thoughts? Mr. Kulim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with what our colleagues have mentioned, and I'm not sure if we have to wordsmith right now or we could have something. I imagine that the chair would want some action on moving forward with this amendment, so we can always talk about wording here. But I agree with Senator Scheibel. I think something if we want to even keep subsection C of 8.2, something around the board has determined there would be benefit that would accrue to the foundation and the program, period, I think, would be sufficient. Because I definitely understand the interests here in balancing, having some standards for the board to consider, given we don't yet know what specific requests might come our way in the future. So we want to have at least some standards to work with, but allow enough flexibility both for the current board and for future members of the board, right, to consider. So I think something broader in C, in 8.2 subsection C would be sufficient. And I also want to thank Mr. Killian and the team and colleagues who worked on this. As we're thinking again about potential opportunities and just the array of what has come towards the NYL over recent years and what could be coming in the future, having this will be important to allow the board to weigh different options, consider what makes the most sense given those specific circumstances on a case-by-case basis. And so I think it's great to have this before us to take action on, and I'm grateful that we'll have this for the future of the program moving forward.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments on that section? So, Mr. Killian, moving forward, do we need to have you bring a revised proposal to us for bylaw change, or do we just, based on the conceptual discussion we've had, would that be enough to move it forward?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. So any change to the bylaws would need to be approved by the board at a public meeting. So I think the most efficient way to move forward would be I could take the direction that the board has given during this conversation today. So first, for Section 8.2 sub C, to eliminate the idea of weighing benefits against costs and simply identify that there are benefits. And then second, to add a provision requiring the pre-review of any such agreement before the board may
Yes.
approve it by legal counsel. I can make those revisions and have a revised version of this proposal ready for the board's next meeting, ostensibly this summer. I could also try to generate language on the fly right now, but I don't want to hold up the board for that, since we are nearing the end of the agenda.
And to clarify, we will meet before the summer because we're going to be working on the budget too before then, so that can be ready. If I may, members of the board, real quickly, to offer another clarification that would be a change since Mr. Killian's going to be working on it. Under Article 5, officers, but it's not, anyway, 5.8, if you'll look on page 3, you'll say, on the top line, it says Council Bureau to designate a member of the staff of the Bureau as program, it says coordinator. We have been using the language program facilitator. If we could just tweak that word as well when you're working on it, Mr. Killian, would that be okay with yeah, that's the word of art we have been using. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, so no vote on this because we'll move it forward for final action at our next meeting, which could be in 2 months, so we can get working on this budget stuff right now and have Mr. Killian can breathe easily because we won't be requesting things in the 12th hour. We'll move on then to agenda item number 10. And again, this is where we have a request about a meeting. Again, before June 13th, I believe, is when Interim Finance is meeting again. So it would be my thought to get back together and let's get our heads together and have a meeting, maybe even as early as March or early April, so we're ahead of the game before. As Mr. Killian was so acute in sharing with us last time, we met after the budget was already approved. Let's get in front of it this time. Strong recommendation from council, and I appreciate that. So we will work within those parameters. So anything else that the board would like to discuss at the quick-to-be upcoming next board meeting of the Nevada Youth Legislature Board. Foundation, it says here, but board. Any additional thoughts? Anything you want to discuss? We did respond to all of your requests. We felt really good that we came back with answers. So you want to put us to work, we're happy to do it. Right, Tina? Anything else? So primarily, then, we'll likely focus on budget and any other things that show up between now and then that we need. Language for the bylaws, we'll have that. We'll look at that. And any reports of things that are showing up. Maybe an update, Tina, on the credits thing, if you learn anything else on activity credits. Anything else you'd like to know? Okay. Under agenda item number 11, any additional comments or questions? Anything else the board would like to discuss?
We didn't set a date.
We don't have the date yet.
Well, I'm going to propose one.
Okay, that's great. No, let's get it on the, no, I'm, great, all for it. Before spring break.
In April,
That's after, isn't it?
yes, but in April, our meeting is on the 11th, and it might be good to have it on the 10th or the 12th, so I only have to fly down here once.
Okay, bear with me here. April, I'm sorry, what day again?
The NYL meeting is on the 11th, so the 10th or the 12th, maybe?
I will be in Carson City
Oh, that's right.
for my one visit each session, each year of this term. I could
Yes.
chair from Carson City, I just won't be here.
Well, are you coming for the 11th? We were talking about the 10th or the 12th.
Oh,
I was proposing the 10th or the 12th.
prior to. 12th is, it doesn't matter. What does the board consider best? 10th or 12th?
I was talking 4 p.m. again.
Yeah.
Would 3:30 work?
It may be better so we don't run into the staff's end of day.
Yes, would that work for everybody?
10th, the 10th at 3:30, does that work for everybody?
10 at 3:30?
The 10th at 3:30, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Tina.
Madam Chair, if I could.
Now we know. Yes, Mr. Killian.
Just so the board is aware, there is a joint interim standing committee on revenue meeting scheduled for April 10th at 1 o'clock. I'm not sure if there's any overlap between the members of the board and the members
How
of
about
that committee.
the 12th?
And
How does
Madam
the
Chair,
12th look for everybody?
on the
Yes.
12th, there's a joint interim standing committee on government affairs meeting at 12:30, and I'm not sure if we have any overlap in membership.
Oops.
We're not on either of those committees.
And-
Oh, okay.
Would, Mr. Killian, do you think they would be complete if we met at 3:30? Would those typically be done by then?
Madam Chair, Asher Killian, Legislative Council. There are no agendas posted for these meetings yet, since they would be, I think, the third meeting for both of these bodies during the interim. And it's difficult to project how long the agendas would be at that point. Typically, the interim committees are kind of in full swing of hearing policy issues at that point, so they may run for the entirety of the afternoon.
We can use that other one.
But we could use the other room.
Would that work, Mr. Killian, since there's only one on each of those days, we could just meet in the smaller room?
Madam Chair, Asher Killian, Legislative Council, that's not a thing I could speak to. You need to coordinate
Okay.
that with the director. I was just wanting to make
Come
sure we didn't
on,
have,
sure you can.
I just wanted to make sure you didn't have member overlap that might make a member unavailable for the
Yeah, we
board
don't,
meeting.
we don't. No, we're good. I don't know about Assemblywoman Torres, but we do have a quorum that can meet. Gee.
We're keeping it on the 10th, and that's revenue.
So we're looking at the 10th at 3:30.
Yes.
10th at 3:30.
Madam Chair, if I may, I most likely will not be able to attend from the April 10th through that weekend, but.
Oh, you can't do
but I'll
either of
just
them.
I'll just be one member who wouldn't be here. My apologies.
Would it be possible for you to attend by telephone?
I might be traveling
Okay.
during that time. Like, I might be on a plane that afternoon.
We still would have 5 members. If everybody can be here, we would still have a quorum. Thank you. Thank you. So we're looking at April 10th at 3:30 for the NYL Board. Thank you. Thank you, Tina, for your leadership. Thank you, thank you. And if anything, so we've talked about some of the things to be on the agenda. If the priorities that we've discussed here today, we would like to resolve by then, again, that would be working through budget with Mr. Killian and the fiscal people to ensure going forward that we feel comfortable with some of the things that we've discussed today. Tina will have a report, an update on activities and anything else. What else did we want to bring forward in that meeting at this point? Those are the two things. And, yes, Assembly Member Mosca.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick one, looking at the scholarship application date of April 30th, maybe just to update if we've received any scholarships by then.
Yeah. We'll be eager to see that. And between now and then, we'll be putting the paperwork out and making the notices and so on. Okay, so we have something to start with. Any additional questions or comments? On to agenda item number 12, we'll now open the meeting to public comment. Are there any people in the north who would like to share something with the board at this time? I don't see any. Thank you for sharing the video. Are there any in the south, which we can see in person? Any on the telephone?
The public line is open and working, but we have no callers.
Thank you very much, BPS. We're preparing for adjournment, but I would like to just take this moment to share my gratitude for all of the team who put this together, the Legislative Council Bureau, legal, broadcast, production services, meeting by meeting, training by training, board activity by whatever we're doing, you make sure it's exemplary. And as a special word of gratitude, I would like to thank Maria Guayo, who has served, I'm going to get a little upset here, who has served as our secretary, the source of organization, all of the beautiful graphic work on our materials for the trainings, big smile all the time. She's been with us since 16. And Maria's found an opportunity to move up with her duties and opportunities in the Fiscal Analysis Division. And so her last day was the 31st. And we miss her already. And we are, again, grateful that Constituent Services and LCB are providing support for the continuity and seamlessness of the work we do. So thanks to everyone. I appreciate all of you. And there being no other business before the board, we are adjourned.